we're going to install the pistons into the engine block. I've laid everything out nicely on a table here so I can clearly see what we've got and the process. What you'll notice if you take a look at these pistons, we have an orientation that these must follow. So the piston needs to be installed facing a certain direction. That's indicated on this one by a dot on the crown. That points to the front of the engine. So this piston needs to be installed with the dot facing the front of the engine. That's something to be aware of. As we install them, we just want to make sure that our piston rings are still clocked. That is, the gaps are not all in a line, but offset from each other and freely rotating. What we use to install pistons is a piston ring compressor, because we need to compress these rings in order to fit them into the cylinders. So this is a piston ring compressor. There's a couple of different types. This is probably the most common. And what it does is basically we tighten this down with an Allen key fitting here, and that it becomes loose. We fit it over the piston, we tighten it down. So that's that. What I'm going to do, actually, inside the box I've put 2 pieces of rubber hose, and these are useful to put on the end of the bolts here while I install this, and that prevents us from marking the crankshaft journal as this drops down into the engine. These provide a little bit of protection there for that. Now the piston ring compressor has sharp edges around here, so I'm going to put on some tighty whities to protect my hands, and I just like wearing white gloves. It makes me feel like I'm working in a clean machine shop, which sadly I'm not. First, we'll lubricate the cylinders with some WD-40 just to ease things along. Next, we'll install half of the big end bearing into the piston, because it's easier to do now than later. And we apply some lubricant. We'll pop our rubber boots on here. Okay, let's take this. Now, we're going to install our piston ring compressor. And what we'll do, loosen this off, fit this over the piston. What we want to do is we'll install this piston and this piston first, and then we'll rotate the crankshaft rotate the block over, connect these to the crankshaft, and then we'll install the middle two. So we want to point the crankshaft down. We want these rod journals for these 2 pistons to be as far away as possible. So if we rotate this around, that puts us in the correct position. Now we can very carefully drop this piston in, making sure that it's orientated in the correct direction. We drop this in there. Now, we want to get this piston ring compressor flush around the base here. So the way I like to install pistons is not by knocking them down with a hammer. Many people do that, and it's not ideal, but it's a perfectly good way of getting the job done. But the way to do it nicely is to just twist the piston inside here using the valve recesses as somewhat of a handle, and we should be able to just push this down by hand. So I use these valve seats to just twist this around and work our way down into the engine. There we go, and that's just pushed in. Because I've only got 2 of these rubber hose pipe attachments, I'm just going to push this piston down and get it past the crankshaft so that I can take those 2 rubbers off and use them for the next piston. I'm going to give this journal a good coating of oil, just engine oil, and I'm also going to fill up the oil way there with oil, and the same with this one, just so that when the engine starts we have a decent supply of oil inside. That's good. Now we can install the rod caps, and torque them down. So we take the other bearing shell and we can just install that into the rod cap with its locating tab, and I'll also apply some assembly lube to this. And place this on here. That's right, just make sure that you get your rod caps onto the correct rods. On this engine, there's diagonal scribed marks on the sides, but you should really number them when you dismantle the engine. We've got 2 of the pistons installed. We'll rotate the engine back, install these center 2, spin the crankshaft. Oh, that's smooth. We should rotate this around so that these rod journals are far away and gives us clearance to work the connecting rod around the rod journals. We can now spin the engine over and insert the next 2. We've got all 4 pistons into the block here. We'll rotate it over. On the crankshaft side, we install the last couple of rod caps. We just push this piston up, make sure we clear the journal, add some more engine oil and lubricate these journals nicely and into the oil way. So we've got all our nuts installed on the studs here on the rod caps. We need to torque these down. Unlike the main caps, there's not really an importance in terms of the order in which you tighten these down. So we'll just do these 2 because they're to hand, so we need the torque wrench and what looks like a 14mm socket. 14 it is. The final torque for these nuts is 50 Newton meters. So we'll do that in 3 stages, which means we start at 30 and go up to 40 and then 50. So that's 30. That's the first stage done to 30 Newton meters. Now we go up to 40 and go round again. And we come up to 50 for the final stage. There we go. Let's check the crankshaft rotates. Yeah, that's nice and smooth. Nice smooth clearances. Well, there we go. Pistons successfully installed.